Boom.
Nightmare all the state.
Boom.
Okay, so
Boom shakalaka.
good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I wanted to announce tomorrow we are going to have Mike Points come in, and he's going to not just talk about lending, but talk about behind the scenes with lending, what the process is, what a lender does, how do they qualify people, what documents they tend to get, and then ultimately teach you guys the formula to be able to calculate on the contracts. Okay, if I need to get a first loan and a second loan, and what do I put for interest rate, and how do I check for amortization, and how do I look at, just give you the basics overall, so when you're talking with a client and they ask you, what do you think an average payment is going to be, you'll be able to mathematically give them a ballpark figure of saying this is what taxes, interest, payment would be, but ultimately you're going to need to talk with the lender, and that way you can fill out the contract correctly. I noticed a couple loan amounts. You're putting the down payment where the loan amount should be, or you're putting the deposit where the loan amount, you're putting the loan amount where the deposit should be, and the numbers aren't matching. So I think this would be a good time to bring him in and just teach us all the behind the scenes. What does the underwriter look at when they go to qualify a loan? So he's not here to do a sales pitch in any way about his products. It's more the meat of lending. So
what time is that?
That is tomorrow at
9:30. Is it our bi-weekly?
noon. So we're starting to mix up the Thursdays.
Ask somebody that knows, right?
Asking you, shall receive. We are going to start mixing up the Tuesdays is going to be marketing, Wednesdays is contracts, and Thursdays will be systems or knowledge, something along the lines of because we're launching Commission Zinc and Broker Sumo and Skyslope and all these things. We need to have a day that we just train on systems, and this is, you know, that way we can answer questions and make sure everybody is good. So with that said, tomorrow noon, office meeting is tomorrow because it's 9:30, and there you go. So I'd like to introduce and bring forward.
We never met.
No introduction. No introduction.
No introduction can suffice, or no one knows enough.
Take it away.
All right. And that crowd goes wild.
Oh, I guess I should go back to your screen. No.
Is that yours? Wait, what? Good. Oh.
Trina's on. Hey, Trina.
Don't be rude.
Muted.
Say hi back. Then mute yourself.
Okay, boom.
I said hi.
Hey, now we can hear you.
Okay, there you go, Gary.
Thank you. Where are you guys? The temple lady probably told you, but if you're looking for a transaction, look at a little
I would
search
spell it
bar.
right. There's two B's.
Oh, Gary. Sorry to interrupt already.
No, help yourself.
Cover sheets are going to be very, very important in this office. So just letting you know that.
Excellent.
As they come down in the pipeline, cover sheets.
Must have been that.
Can you do this?
Long ago. So speaking of cover sheets, it's kind of the template lady's deal, right? Oh, we'll use those. Where the hell is your stuff in it? So all I know it's in there. Okay, good. Any minute now, we'll be there. Which version of zip forms am I on right now? Classic, right. Okay, don't be afraid of the new one. I just went back there for some other reason, and now every time I open it, it opens the old one, and it looks familiar, so I don't change it. But the new one will be fine. On the new one, probably the most helpful thing I can tell you is you can tell it that the first screen you see when you get to the new one is the transactions, like I just saw in the other one. Because by default, it opens to the dashboard, which to me, at this point so far, I have no use for the dashboard. Do not care about that pie chart or anything. I want to see my transactions. So you can tell it to open to the transactions. I just kind of forgot what that was. Figured that out. So today, we're gonna talk about the inspections paragraph. You guys are all contract experts. You guys probably know which paragraph that is in the RPA, right?
Getting better at
It'll
it.
always be Linda.
14B.
Excellent, look at that. With no experience. Okay, 15 years, he knows 14B. And there it is. All right. Oh, look at me highlight. So any questions on the stuff we went over, which has now been like 2 weeks ago, on disclosures and all that junk? Anybody have some stuff? Y'all remember no descriptive adjectives in your avid, because everybody from the broker on up to the attorney for your E&O is going to get nervous about you saying mold, big crack, settling crack, stuff like that. Anything else? All right. So to start this, I wanted to kind of, I guess, ask everybody and remind everybody at the same time. When your seller tells you, we want to sell the house as is, and your buyer's kind of wondering what as is, and what do these contracts say? So I think it's, so I guess the question is, do you guys remember, are these contracts as is contracts? Yes, this is not here. Paragraph 11 talks about property condition and says that the property is sold as is in its present condition on the day that the offer was made, and that condition has to be maintained until through the possession is made to the buyer. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember whether it's close or possession. Possession. Is it possession? I think you're right. I'm not going to go back and look. It's too far. It's a whole 3 paragraphs. So the as-is part, though, is subject to the buyer's investigation. So paragraph 14B, well, the whole paragraph 14 is all about investigation and the contingencies that your buyers have, because they'll always tell you, hey, we kind of want to, where does it say in here that I'm going to do a home inspection? Where does it say in here that I'm going to get to look at a pest control report? Where does it say in here that they have to give me good title and all that kind of stuff? Paragraph 14 takes care of all that junk. The seller has some obligations in paragraph 14A to provide stuff to the buyer. And then 14B and C and on down virtually to the bottom of the page. Yeah, it is. It's the whole page now. Is all about the buyer's investigation rights and what happens basically if the buyer finds something they kind of don't like. So I think one of the most important distinctions to make too is on the contingencies. Remember, I think passive removal was probably gone by the time you started. It's been gone for a long time. Yeah. So the contingencies in the contract are all active removal contingencies. So is there a drop dead date in the contract for any contingencies? Like hard and fast.
Well, it'd have to be your date you put on there, wouldn't it? Over there it says 17 or whatever you put down on the square.
Yeah, there's some numbers. All these little blanks are filled in and
Well, I
stuff.
put 21 in there.
Defaults or yeah, we talked about that. I think try to make them match up because we're realtors. You know, if we can remember one number, awesome, yay. Try to remember like 4 numbers, like epic fail. So speaking of epic. Dale was just talking about epic surf and Kauai. Like, can you just leave? He will, right? Just get up and go back. Okay, there's a plane leaving in an hour. Bye. So Linda's right. There really isn't a drop dead date. We're going to talk about that a little more as we go on. The contingencies basically run on ad infinitum. We've created with the 2002 version of the contract that we're generally this part we're still using. When you have a 17-day inspection period, on the 18th day, nothing happened. On the 19th day, nothing happened. On the 50th day, nothing happened, unless the seller or their agent woke up and said, hey, those guys are out to 75 days on their 17 days. What do you want to do about it? I don't know. Do you think it'll screw up the deal? That's what they always say. So it just kind of runs along until the seller gets tired of your BS and says, hey, what are you doing over there? You know, you can have a little conversation. It's good to have a little conversation. Most agents are only comfortable with a little conversation. They're not really comfortable with a notice to perform. But the contingency dates don't become set in stone where you have to either waive or cancel until there's a notice to perform from one party to the other. And the seller's got some timeframes they're supposed to hit too, but their timeframes run on ad infinitum. It's a good Latin term from Catholic schools, isn't it? Until the buyer says, hey, am I getting a prelim this month or this year? Like, what the hell are you guys doing? The heck you guys doing, Trip? Everybody know that already? Is that old news, or is that kind of, there's some funny licks out there? Yeah, just so you know. And my poster child story for that, because you guys said the backstory was okay, and I'm only doing one paragraph, so I can do it. Is it was a short inspection, like a 10-day inspection or something on a cash deal on a house in Pismo. And the listing agent, you know, they're doing some business, you know, they're kind of busy. And, you know, but I never take it for granted that they know their stuff, and I'm sure as hell not teaching them. I have a fiduciary duty to my buyer, like, hey, seller's agent, you know, I hope you're good at this, because we're going to find out. So we come along to the end of the contingency period, so the 10 days is up. I'll call it the 7. So the 17 days is up. Maybe that makes more sense to everybody. And the sellers are kind of getting ready to move, and they're kind of waiting for the contingency period to end before they pack up and leave. Well, the rest of our reports come in about 2 days later, and we're now ready to formulate our request for repairs and ask them for $10,000. Well, they packed up and left. They really kind of want to close our deal now. And the listing agent is freaked out because I can't ask for repairs because my contingency period ended. And I said, no, it didn't. Was that right?
Yeah.
No, it didn't. Yeah, I got all day to do this. I got to give you my request for repairs within my contingency period. And if you forgot to notice me, I mean, you could have a birthday and an anniversary dinner before I have to waive my contingencies. So I learned on that deal, that's a really important thing for people to know, especially listing agents. When those days roll up, then you got to be like my friend that sells houses in Trilogy that actually was waiting, just so anxious to notice me and give me grief, because she knows if they don't notice me, I hang in there telling them I will keep a buyer contingency until I'm in trouble for it if I'm not really making everybody mad. It's kind of out of it. Now, if they're starting to get a little upset on the other side, you better heave to and, you know, be fair dealing and work on putting the deal together. But the contingencies will run on.
We sent out a lot
until,
of forms on this.
Yeah, and it's just a form. You know, people go, man, that's just rude. Well, there's no other way to stop that clock. I mean, you gotta, you know, you gotta do something. And, you know, at least have a conversation. But my friend out there at Trilogy, well, she was like, she knew how I was about letting it go on. If I wasn't ready, I wasn't going to get on my buyer's case, but you better waive your contingency. I mean, you want to keep moving and close on time. So she noticed me a day early, so I got a real kick out of that. She goes, yeah, okay, smart guy, but yeah, guess what's happening tomorrow? Right, okay, fine.
Harry, that's a real good tactic though. If you're representing the buyer, just drag the feet.
Well, I mean, if you kind of need to, but if you can waive your contingencies, everybody feels better. But I remember, I'm kind of hanging my hat on Stella Ling, that used to was trotting around in front of everybody for a while. In fact, she got hired by Berkshire Hathaway. She's their chief legal counsel now. And she was an attorney at CAR, and her bailiwick was contract stuff. She's back in the short sale days. Stella used to come up and teach all the time. And she said, hey, when you're in this contract, don't forget who you're working for. You know, if you're the listing agent, keep an eye on those time frames. You're representing the buyer, you got to just be quiet. And I thought, all right, I always kind of felt that, but okay, thanks, Stella, because I can kind of hang my hat at. Well, Stella said, you know, Stella, big time. So it's just, I guess the whole point is it's important to know as a listing agent that on day 17, nothing happens. The contract won't force anything to happen. It's somebody has to do something. Now you might get a buyer's agent, you're rocking right along. I've had, you know, all cash deals, 15-day escrow, 7-day inspection period. I want to be done too. I want to know that check's coming and that I'm going to be able to close in 15 days. That's a hurry up kind of an offense, I guess, for reference. So you got to stay on top of them too. If I need a couple of days, I'll take them if I can get them.
And that contingency release is probably the most important, most powerful document when it comes to your protection. Make sure that when you release it, you have reached out to all parties to verify that everybody has done their job, because all you can do is work off of good faith. But if you have something back from the lender that shows, oh yeah, you're good, 100%, I'm good with this, release. We just had this happen with Noah, lender says, all good, we release, and oh, well, I forgot to review the appraisal. The appraisal was good, but we forgot to look at it. And then all of a sudden there was some stuff on there that we need to renegotiate. So you have to, and it was powerful that Noah had that in writing, because then we can lean back on the lender and say, hey, work with us on this, because ultimately you gave us in good faith that we were good to go. So make sure you talk to all parties, escrow, everybody, when you release that contingency. Do we have any issues on the prelim? Do we have anything on the appraisal? Do we have anything on the loan? Because that is the last piece. Once you release that appraisal, that deposit is going to be difficult to keep if they pursue.
Yeah, that's well said, because deposits are, like you guys know, they don't always, you don't always get them, Mr. Seller. But what they say in the contract is it's at risk. So when you waive your contingencies, your deposit basically just went hard. It's almost, you're at the point of, unless you pull a rabbit out of a hat, or you got a seller that says, if you give me the deposit, great. Otherwise, get out of my deal. I got another guy. I want to move on. Sometimes that happens. But the deposit is at risk when you waive the contingencies, which is why I like to pump that deposit up there a little bit if I'm on the listing side. And people say, well, the seller doesn't get it anyway. Well, it's right. Okay, then what's your beef? I want $25,000 on that line in this $900,000 deal. I think that's fair. I'm not going to get it anyway. What's your beef? You got $300,000 down. Put your money where your mouth is, and you'll find out if they start getting.
That is not true. We've got it for ourselves. We've got it.
Yeah,
it is not true. It is at risk.
Yeah, it's at risk. It's. They have rights, and if the seller wants to assert their rights, and it depends who you're working with too. Some of those guys, they can't wait. If your sellers are married attorneys, they're waiting for something I just got up this morning, we're both retired now, what am I going to do? Hey, how's that real estate deal? Let's just come on. You guys are paid by the hour to fight. Some of them. Anyways, yeah, that's important to know. That's an excellent point. Thank you, David. When you waive your contingencies, look out. And there's more than one way to waive them. It doesn't always have to. I'm glad you brought that up, because you sent me down another rabbit hole, which I've also seen catch somebody at a different company who no longer had the benefit of my training by surprise. There's more than one way to waive your contingencies. And we're going to get to that in a second. When you do the request for repairs, in fact, let's just do that. So so the seller has 7 days, and I'll get to that because it's highlighted. I'm really excited about that. It's going to help me a lot. Seller has 7 days to do a ton of stuff. I've been, like Dave was talking, pushing the buyer stuff out to 21. I've been pushing the seller out to 14. It's good luck getting your well test, your septic, your prelim, and everything in 7 days. That listing agent better be on it, or some of that stuff better have been done ahead of time. That's a tight time frame. So it's important to know that time frame works the same way as the buyer's does. That 7 days turns into 40, unless the buyer gets tired of waiting. So you can, start dialoguing with the listing agent. Hey, we don't have the prelim yet. It's kind of out of their control, but if nobody's leaning on anybody, then you're at the bottom of the pile, right? So the seller's got obligations in 14A, and as the buyer's agent, you kind of want to keep an eye on that. So the listing agent, keep an eye on that. Make sure they get their stuff done. It lists everything they have to do. Paragraphs 5, 6, 7, 8B, 10A, B, C, F, 11A, and 13A are all in 14A. What did I just say?
That whole
A bunch of paragraphs. Now I'll write stuff in those paragraphs. I'll write something in 5A, and I'll write something in what's the other one in there? 8B. And it becomes part of 14A. I'm the buyer's agent. I'm telling them, hey, in your, you need to provide me a list of everything that's not included in the sale. They have 7 days to do that. It's not during my inspection period. I just tied it to 14A by making a note in 8B. So you got to kind of, that's your homework, right? Everybody go back and read 5, 6, 7, 8B, 5, 10A, B, C, and F, 11A, and 13A. 11A is condition of property. 13A is title. That's why the prelim is tied. The prelim's got to be in the buyer's hands by 7 days, according to that 7 right there. And on day 8, like I say, what happens? Nothing, yeah, unless you notice them, you know, but, you know, keep an eye on them, keep communication is the key to everything. And you'll get listing agents that want to, you know, play a little rough with you, write a little rough shot. It's okay, it's their job. Take it personal, you know.
So did I hear on other terms for 14A, if you want the seller to do something for you, you're representing the buyer, you want the seller to go above and beyond on something, give you a document, whatever.
Yeah, something.
You would go into other terms in 8A. Other terms.
Well, 8B5 is
8B, sorry.
the what's included and excluded from the sale.
Okay.
So you just write it in there.
So in there, you'd say item 14A, blah, 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 to be included in contract. How would you tie those two together?
Well, if I write something in 8B5,
Okay.
8B5 is listed in 14A. What if I
okay.
had a little?
Okay, so you
Last
don't
time I
have to
did that,
start
I
with
changed.
item 14A to be included.
Yeah, now I will say I have said redundancy is our friend. God knows who's reading the thing. Some real estate agent. Kidding me? If I haven't met them, they have no idea what's in the contract. So right there it says, seller has 7 days or whatever you put in there after acceptance to deliver to buyer all reports, disclosures, and information for which seller is responsible under paragraphs 5, 6, 7. So if I write something in 8B5, I got a line I could write in there.
There you go.
And 5 is I think 5 is the other terms one now. Yeah, 5 is the other terms. 5 is the old 4. 7 is the new 5. And 11A and 13A are included. 10A, B, C, and F. 10 is the disclosure paragraph. It's like TDS, SPU, all that stuff. Listing agents have it. All that stuff has to. The buyer's supposed to have it. Trying not to move. Change my screen. By that number right there, whether it's 7 or something you're writing here. That's why I've been just bumping it out a little bit. It's like, it's going to take the listing agent at least 24 hours to snap out of it and realize he's in escrow. Then he's got to start leaning on everybody to get stuff done. And if they don't have TDS, SPQ, and a bunch of stuff like that done ahead of time, they got to scramble to get it done. So I'll take the heat off of them. I'm a good agent. I'm friends with everybody. It's honest and fair deal. You know what? Take 2 weeks. We're going to be 3 weeks with our inspections anyway. You know, just make sure you don't take any longer than that because I want to finish my contingencies on time. So that means, Mr. Seller, you have to give me everything you're supposed to so that I can review it in my contingency period. If they're late with some of their stuff, what happens?
Notice to perform?
If you give a notice to perform, right? And what if they don't quite make it? Like the prelim, you got 7 days pre-printed up there, the prelim comes in, and you got a 17-day inspection period, the prelim comes on day 18. Even if you've waived your contingencies, they've just extended your contingency period, at least for the prelim. When they're late, you add days. It's
Is it 5?
2 days?
5 days if by mail and 3 days if by anything else or something like that. That's paragraph 10. And it's also in here, and we'll get to that. But just
Even if we release our contingencies.
yeah, so you got that
any
one
other
left, but
document,
the rest of them are gone.
We got a window.
So
They
that
gave us
becomes-
back a window.
So that becomes a new material fact.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what that is. Yeah, that's a new thing, or something the seller was responsible for that the buyer has an opportunity to review it. It's late to the party. So it's but that's the only window that's open, right? If you've released all your contingencies and put your deposit at risk, and then all of a sudden they show up finally with the TDS, it's got to be something that was on that TDS because all the other contingencies are gone, right?
Now, those additional days, are those forced contingency removal, or do we have to redo the contingency again? So if we've already released our contingencies, they were late to the party, they delivered a document, we have our 3-day window. At the end of 3 days, does it automatically revert back to the release of contingencies, or do we have to perform and do a whole notice again?
I think that's an excellent question. I'm going to say, hopefully somebody remembers, because these are the ones I email CAR after the class and ask them like, hey,
That's a good little window right
what
there.
about that? Yeah, because if it's 3 days, but it takes a notice, now it's 5. If they're 2 days late on the notice, now it's 7.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a pretty small window. And that's the other thing I think too about the contingency release. Make sure you're careful what you write on there. There's a whole bunch of check boxes. There's I'm waiving some of them. I'm waiving all of them. When you waived them all, it's arguable that you waived them all. And some stuff you're not allowed to waive, statutory disclosures, the buyer can't waive receipt or review of them. But the prelim might fall into that. You might waive your prelim contingency and then they give it to you. It's like, if I was an attorney, I'd take that case. And guess who'd be responsible? Wouldn't be the buyer. Be the guy that filled out that contingency removal, I think. But I know that's an excellent question. How does a late document and an extra 3-day thing end? Does it just end in 3 days? But it says in here all the contingencies are, and in paragraph 30 or whatever it is for definitions, there's no such thing as passive removal. So at the 3 days, the listing agent better snap out of it and notice you. You better notice you on day 1 because it's a 2-day notice. Yeah.
These are the little.
Well played. I like it.
Because the most common document that's late is an avid. Like right now, I'm overdue on an avid.
As a listing agent?
As the listing agent, yes.
Okay, so your TDS, so what's wrong with that?
I am breach of contract right now.
Been attached to the.
Well, I don't know if it's.
Now, if I don't
breach,
provide
but
an avid, because an avid's not a required document, then I'm not a breach. Right?
But you have to have written on the TDS, you have to have, as the listing agent,
Yeah. I'm
you have
breach.
to have filled in, you have to have met your visual inspection disclosure
Yes.
required obligation.
I checked the box, I'm breach.
Okay.
Breach of contract right
Well,
now.
kind of. Well, the seller's just late delivering the TDS. I mean, it's not necessarily a breach. It's still, they haven't been noticed. So, you know, it's kind of, and breaches, that same lady that used to like to notice me used to use breach all the time. He used to tell her, yeah, breach is like, you're flagrant. I mean, you know, that's a punch on basketball. I mean, that's a flagrant. So it's, you know, maybe you're out of contract, you haven't breached, because when you breach, you start losing rights all over the place.
Yes,
That's kind of
they need to
really
notice me, and I
heavy duty.
haven't performed, and they need to notice.
Well, they need to notice the seller, right? Because the seller hasn't performed.
Yes.
Because the TDS, if you guys remember from paragraph 10, hasn't been delivered until the listing agent's avid showed up.
So what's now?
That's me walking through the property.
That's called, they don't teach it in Kauai, and you should have been
Agent visual
It's called
inspection.
donate.
I'll let you.
a little bit, just a little bit.
Agent visual, so I just need to walk the property and
Visual
physically
inspection disclosure.
inspect the property.
Remember the last time you did a TDS? Like, kind of, it's probably been a while, but
No.
because you were gone? Okay. So the transfer disclosure statement on page 3 has a spot where agent notes the following items for disclosure or something like that. Because you're required by state law since about 1987 to walk through the property and say, hey, you know, this thing's a wreck or whatever. You're supposed to actually be another set of eyes for the principals in the transaction. So there was like 5 lines or something like that on the TDS, and your whole inspection had to fit in there. Well, later they came up with the AVID form, Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure Form, and it's a 3-page form. 1 page is an explanation of kind of what the form is, what your obligations as an agent are, and the other 2 pages are a room-by-room walkthrough of the property. So I think it's the best form probably they ever made, because it starts at the entry, so you like walk up the sidewalk, you make some notes. Next is the living room, you walk in, you know, that kind of stuff. And it makes you carefully walk through the property. You write something in every applicable blank on that form, and then you've complied with your agent inspection disclosure, because the seller has a disclosure obligation. Both agents, buyer's agent, seller's agent, have a disclosure obligation. So yeah, it just helps get
Because
that.
what you can look at and what you can't look at, what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, first page of the app, it talks about like, it's like, I'm not a home inspector, I'm not a roofer, I'm not a plumber, you know, I'm just here to look. And like the attorney said last month, and smell, and like, you know, I don't know, you know, if you become aware of it, then you're supposed to say something. Went to CR with that one too. So let's see. Yeah, so we're still in the seller's paragraph. So seller's got some time frames, so be aware of what's in them and how long that time frame is. And as the buyer's agent, you control the time frame unless you get a counter offer. Now, if I'm countering your entire offer, I'll probably counter in there that the seller needs 14 days to do that because I'm kind of lazy. The buyer has inspection obligations, and just like in the seller, it says, deliver to buyer all reports, disclosures, and information, very, very all-encompassing kind of language. Same for the buyer. Buyer has blank days to complete all buyer investigations, review all disclosures, reports, lease documents to be assumed, other applicable information which buyer receives from seller to prove all matters affecting the property. You turn that place inside out during the time frame in 14B. So that's where you have your home inspector and all the guys come in, they do all their reports. You want to get those guys ordered, you know, up front and all that stuff, because you've got to complete your review and turn in your request for repairs if you're staying by the letter of the contract before that time period runs out. So that's 2 weeks and 3 days. So it's, you guys better get out there. You need it. Everybody needs to be on that. So you can, you know, if you got a 30-day escrow, you can't go much farther than that 17 anyway, because you're going to want to get all your disclosures put to bed before your buyer starts spending a bunch of money on getting their loan and all that stuff. So, we're going to look at the request for repairs in a second here. What I wanted to, yeah, it's in paragraph 2. I thought it was somewhere else. So another important thing to remember is, so the buyer can ask for the seller to do stuff. The property sold as is, subject to the buyer's inspections, and then the buyer can say, hey, I want you to do some stuff. You'll have sellers that will tell you, just so they know we're not doing anything, like bank repos or REOs. The thing I tell the sellers all the time is I can't keep them from asking. They have a contractual right to ask. But relax, Mr. Seller, because you'll see in paragraph 2 there it says, within the time specified in paragraph 14B2, sorry, within the time specified in paragraph 14B1, buyer may request seller make repairs or take any other action regarding the property, like a credit or something like that. Seller has no obligation to agree to or respond to buyer's request. Seller can just go talk to the handler. I threw your RR in the trash. I do not care. Are you surprised?
No.
No?
Now,
Of course I get you, but I thought you'd go, what?
what about if it's like, where's this fall in smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, this thing?
So the contract obligates them, and it depends how you filled in paragraph, whatever that is, 7 something something. Somewhere in paragraph 7, it talks about the seller's obligations to do stuff, and there's some stuff they're required to do by law. So smoke detector, water heater, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
unless you have some kind of exemption, they're contractually required. So if you wrote an offer with no contingencies, they're still not off the, what was it? 7B. Well, it's right up front. They're still obligated to do the stuff that they're obligated by, not
By
the
law.
contract, but by the state of California to do, or the federal government. The lead-based paint form, the FLD,
Yeah.
there are no exemptions from the lead-based paint form for anybody for anything. So they have to provide that disclosure, even to tenants.
Gary, you know what I hear from a lot of agents is that they'll do their home inspection and they say, they'll request their request for repair, and they say, well, this is a safety item, and they're required to fix it. Just so you know, that's not true.
Yeah.
You can just walk away, you don't have to.
Yeah, they hang their hats on that stuff. Well, we used to hear that all the time. FHA appraiser would go out like 30 years ago and say, yeah, we basically just get after the health and safety stuff. So the FHA appraiser would go out there and say, okay, here's some things that need to be fixed for this house to sell with an FHA loan. These are health and safety issues. I'm missing a handrail or something like that. Who has to fix them? The seller? No. Seller doesn't have to do anything. And they made that perfectly clear right there. I don't care what you put on that. They don't have to do it. They have to do what they're legally required to do, and there's no law that says seller must provide a nice house for you. That law didn't make it. I don't know if it's ever been tried or broached or not. Yeah, their seller could just say, hey, it says as is. I mean, look all you want. Paragraph 11 says, you're buying it the way I left it the day I drove. I was running when I parked it. Knock yourself out.
Of course, that might jeopardize your deal. Be able to find them out.
Yeah, right. Somebody's got to come up with it, right? So who's got all the money in these deals, right? Have you heard your principals tell you who's got all the money in these deals? Do they have a license number on everything? Yeah. The first place they look is to the agents. The second place is they go try to figure out how to pay for it. But you're made of money, so you know they're going to come to you. And you're making a fortune at the end of this deal because there isn't a principal alive that understands splits. Just so you know, they love to see you help. And it's important to know too, I mean, speaking of that kind of stuff, you know, you're into a real beater property. This might not be a good one for FHA or VA or any of that stuff where the appraisal has an extra like 2 or 3 pages. Okay, so let's get to the request for repair. So we've gone out and we've looked at all the disclosures and the deal was I just wrote it. The guy says, so when do we ask the seller for all the stuff? Because we did a bunch of investigation like a month before we wrote the offer. When do we ask them for all that stuff that we want them to do? And I told them when we know all the stuff we want them to do, when we've seen the prelim and we've seen the pest report and we've seen all that stuff that's going to happen in the deal, do your request for repairs, then we're going to roll it out toward the end of the contingency period. We're just going to keep thinking of stuff to look at until you're really, really happy that you know what kind of condition it is and you know what you want to ask the seller to do and what you want them to fix for you and not fix and all that kind of stuff. Then we're going to do a request for repairs. I want to show you that form because I want to show you how important that is. We should split screen them. The names and everything. So when you fill out your request for repairs, I got a story for this too. Oh, I can tell another story. More than one story for this. You fill out your request for repairs, you're going to ask the seller to do stuff. So let's say the seller says, you know what, you're right. I feel terrible about those gutters or whatever that is that's bothering you. So you tell the seller, we want you to do that stuff. You need some, and the seller says, wait, what do you got there?
See some green.
There's a wallet out.
See some green.
Wait, come back. So let's say the seller says, you're right, I've always felt bad about the way that thing that you want fixed looks. So you know what? I'm going to do it. So the buyer says, please do that. And the seller says, I will do that. What just happened to your physical inspection contingency right then? Can't always be linear. It's not going to be Ben. He's still on Kauai time. Ben will jealous. Just saying. It's gone. Went away. Surprised at daylights at an office that goes by initials just a couple of years ago. They wanted to say something about their physical inspection contingency. They had lost it 10 days ago when the seller agreed to the repairs. Right down there. Oops, went down a little farther. So the buyer section, see buyer request, paragraph 1. Seller response down there. I don't know why it doesn't have a 2. Well, there's 2. Copy the following inspection. So what is down here in the seller? So buyer says, hey, I want you to do stuff, and seller agrees. Let's pretend that seller agrees to all buyer's requests, provided in writing. Buyer removes physical inspection contingency, or buyer removes contingencies attached on a CR. So when the buyer gets this form back and signs it down there at the bottom, they waived their physical inspection contingency in writing. If seller agrees to all, right down there at the bottom, where's my little guy? If seller agrees to all buyer's requests, buyer hereby removes the physical inspection. There was no CR form, no contingency removal form in there, but your physical inspection contingency is over. You can go look all you want, but you don't have any more contingencies. I don't care what it is. You're going to have a really hard time getting these guys to do anything. You've waived your physical inspection contingency by completing the request for repairs.
Well, then why is there request for repair number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Why are there multiple requests?
Sometimes that happens. So let's say in our request for repairs, buyer requests that seller prior to final verification of condition. It doesn't say prior to close, which I think is an important distinction too. So your final verification of property condition has to be within no earlier than 5 days before the close of escrow. But somewhere in 5 days before the close of escrow, you go out there and make sure the seller did all the stuff they said they were going to do. And if they didn't, you can hold up that deal because they're contractually obligated to do some stuff, and they didn't do it, they better go do it. Or we better renegotiate it or do something, right? So prior to her,
Because that's what I usually do on Avid is within the last 5 days.
When you read
Make sure they're out of the house.
Go ahead.
Well, the one I just,
So take, yeah, I can hear you groaning back
That
there.
needs to be up front.
oh, really?
As soon as you get your listing, a week later, you should be doing your.
I said Abbott, I didn't mean Abbott, I meant,
Verification.
yeah.
Oh, the VP?
Yeah.
Yeah, the VP is the form by which we verify that it's been done. Yeah, the VP can't be done until the end, right? Because
Okay, is that where you do your VP then, those last 5 days?
yeah, because
That's what I
what
tried
you're
to do.
doing in that 5 days is verifying the property conditions. That's why that form
Right.
has a place to list the stuff they didn't do. Yep, there's a form for that. We have 300 forms, we have a form for it. So the buyer says, hey, I got that one story out of the way. Buyer says, hey, I want you to do some work. And the seller says, right down here, see? They don't, they do eventually. So the seller responds to buyer's request on the attached forms, the RRRR, pirate form, seal form, whatever you want to call it, right? So the seller you might say, counteroffer the buyer's request for repairs, right? So if you don't like what the seller said, that's where you go to request for repairs number 2. It's really hard to keep this thing going like counteroffers, because the way you respond to a seller's response is either you agree with it, you make minor changes, or you start the whole thing over. We'll look at that form in a minute. Finish this form first. So, can't remember what year, 2010 maybe, they took the pest control stuff, 2014, they took the WPA, the wood destroying pest addendum, basically out, and they took pre-printed references to pest control work generally out of the contract. Paragraph 12 still mentions it. So we used to be able to, you can see in 1B, that generally that language used to be in the contract. You could just say, hey, I need you to do a section 1 clearance. I need you to do a section 2 clearance. We'll talk about that in a second too. On the pest control stuff, well, all that stuff disappeared out of the contract. Now it's in the request for repairs. It doesn't show up anywhere else. You can write it in the contract. We probably talked about that back then. But right here is where you can ask for pest work to be done. No matter who got the pest report, a buyer can get the pest report, a seller can give you a pest report, but the way to ask for work to get done on the pest report, if you didn't obligate them to it in the contract, is on the request for repairs. So I can't remember the property anyway, so I had a deal, and the broker had to call me because I'm a listing agent, so we open escrow, and like the next day, the buyer's agent sends me a request for repairs, and she wants pest control work done. She goes, look at me, you know, and how to keep it out of the contract and all that stuff. And I said, so you really want to waive your physical inspection contingency right now? And I always said, I'm not going to train him. Okay, I know the guy, I know everybody over there. It's like, oh, I just can't do that to him. All I had to do was have my seller go, yeah, section 1, yeah, no problem. We'll do that. Oh, by the way, your physical inspection contingency just went away and we're on day 2. No reason to send a home inspector, is there? Thank you. Yeah. She's like, what? So then the boss calls up and he's like, what? I said, let me finish. So, good to know, right?
Wow.
Careful with this form because you're going to waive your physical inspection contingency when you get agreement. You might be on request for repair number 3, but when you guys finally figure out who's doing what, why, and when, your physical and one of your contingencies just went away. And if that was the only one you had left, because the first 7 days everything was awesome and you waived your prelim contingency and all your other stuff, and maybe it's a cash deal so you don't have a loan contingency. When the seller agrees to do this work, your physical inspection contingency is gone, so you gotta be careful with this one. Any questions on that whole, everybody's homework is, except some people, read a pest control report. Get your hands on a pest control report somewhere and learn what section 1 and section 2 are.
Gary, down there where it says seller response, there's a box that says buyer removes these contingencies identified on the attached contingency removal.
Yeah, only if there's an attached contingency removal, you have to actually incorporate that box. So in seller's response, if there's no contingency removal that accompanied this form on the way in, or that accompanies the seller's response, you know, on the way back to the buyer, then the physical inspection contingency is waived by default in the paragraph. So when you check a box, you change the paragraph, right? So this paragraph says, seller agrees to buyer's request, buyer removes the physical inspection contingency. Right down at the bottom, it says, buyer hereby removes the physical inspection contingency by signing down there. If you check the box, it says, seller agrees to all buyer's requests, and then check that box, buyer removes those contingencies identified on the attached contingency removal form. I will usually send a contingency, or often send a contingency removal with it, depending on where I'm at in the contract. It gives the listing agent a little ammunition to go to the seller and say, yeah, they want you to do this stuff, and they've waived all the contingencies to date. The only thing they have left is their loan. So if you'll do this stuff, that takes care of their physical inspection contingency too. You can put those forms in concert and maybe help your case. And also, you've identified as a buyer's agent what contingencies are going to be removed when the seller signs this. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, very good. That's getting different. It's getting different. Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, there's a good box, right? All caps. No. Get out of here. What kind of crap is that? Told you all my requests for repairs. Good. Because even worked in my buddy. Same thing here. You'll see seller response, but this is the pirate form or the seal form. Great. Thank you, Betty Lou, wherever you are. Doing an open house for Molly. Did you see that? Hey, I passed my test. Hey, want to do my open house? So right there, there's never. So you could. This thing could happen. I've seen them go a ways. Like you got a lot of work to do. The seller kind of doesn't want to do it and kind of wants to give them money. You could be on request for repair and reply like 4 if you're not careful. So that's why those blanks are in there. And that's why there are several generations or iterations, which I hear is not really a word, of these forms in your zip forms library. And that's the template lady's problem.
It's not the template lady anymore. I've already trained.
Moment of silence. Passing with the template. Okay. So, right, I'll do it. No, I won't. So seller tells the buyer, hey, you asked for a lot of stuff, and I'm feeling you on some of it, right? You know, so I'll do some of your stuff. So I'm going to respond to your request for repair with this pirate form. RR. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, right? So I'm not going to do any of that pest control. In fact, I'm not going to do anything because I'm a Lannister and I just throw money at crap to fix it. Where is it? Oh, right there. You could say, I'm not doing anything, but I'll give you 10 grand for your trouble. How do you like me now? Okay, open the whole new another can of worms with another's not really good either, with the contract, because you really got to be careful with credits. Who do you want, as soon as somebody says credit and you're getting a loan in your deal, who do you want to talk to? Can't always be lender. Lender, you may screw up that loan till they can't fix it. When you do all this work and you send an addendum to everybody and says, seller to credit buyer at close of escrow, $15,000 for repairs. And the underwriter goes, what the hell's broken over there? Wait a minute, I want to see the home inspection, and we're going to send you a purchase back. Now, what are you talking about? Don't do that without talking to the lender. Now, the lender might say, yeah, you can take that to about 5 grand and I'm good. Or take it to 10 and call it closing costs. Get some coaching from the lender on how to wrap that credit in there. Because the 2014 revision of the residential purchase agreement says that any credits are basically subject to how they're going to affect the loan and how everybody feels about it. And it says in there that if you're screwing up your lender or anybody else or any kind of laws or anything, then your credit is out the window. It didn't work, and we're changing it to whatever fits in with the legal and lender ramifications for the credit you asked for. So you wanna, these credits gotta be kind of discussed, you know, with the people in the deal and the lender and everybody before you start just putting them in there. Cash deal, gotta love them cash deals, right? Guy pays $1 million for it, this guy gives him 25 grand back, done deal, no one cares, because it's a cash deal, lender's out of the question. Money talks and credit walks. So the seller has a lot of options in the seller response to buyer request. I'll do it all. It's on the RR. I'll do all of them except, and there's a place to put except, and there's also, you can write in there, like, I usually put like 3 asterisks if I'm gonna attach something, then in all caps, see attached, and then 3 asterisks after that. I'll put a list on there, I'll exempt your entire open space, like you gave me that, I just need to retype it for you. And there's credit.
Is the seller required to send this back or not really?
Nope.
You can just send
Seller
it
can
on.
ignore them.
That's what I meant.
The seller is under no obligation to respond to the request. But it's, to me, I always thought that was the rudest paragraph in the contract world, was like, they don't even have to answer you. And that happened to me one time, everybody just went and hid, and I thought, it's just a horse manure. Come on, just say they're not doing it. I did it. I had to go buy the guy a garage door. Because you really wanted one, everyone wanted to have. And the agents have all the money in there. So yeah, this is, if you're gonna respond and you didn't have room to respond to the RR form was not the response your seller wanted, then they use this form. But Dave's right, they don't have to, they can just go, just, you know, why don't you just email what's her name over there on the other side and just tell them no, we're not doing any of it. In fact, I'm really getting tired of them guys, just notice them. Get that. It could happen at a hot market, that could happen. Like you're negotiating, like you're gonna get some stuff done, you're gonna get a bunch of work done. Hey buyer, I'm taking these guys to town on this stuff, baby. Well, in the meantime, they get a backup offer. It's starting to get kind of ugly over here. Like, you were cute when I married you. What happened? So then you can just go, you know what, beat it. I'm not doing it, right? And then the buyer has to either heave to or cancel or start trying to renegotiate. But yeah, you can put yourself in a little bit of Dutch by getting a little out of control with your request for repair.
Did you cover hold harmless while I walked out from my?
No.
If a buyer, if the seller says, no, I'm not fixing anything, if the buyer says, well, I gotta get it fixed, otherwise I won't be able to get my FHA loan. So they want to do the repairs during the escrow period. Be sure you do a hold harmless clause to protect your seller. If they go in there and get hurt, or it falls out of escrow, they've already put in $2,000.
Right.
They're losing.
That's if you're representing the seller.
If you're representing the seller, protect yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's so you can wrap some paper around that. You can do like some kind of hold harmless agreement or something like that.
Yeah.
We have a form.
Yeah.
And it's recorded and posted on the property, and it's called a notice of non-responsibility. You actually record it at the county, and it's in zip forms now. We used to have to go get them and go to the county recorder's office and get them, and we post them and record them and all that stuff. Learn that from Byron like right off the bat. Because once in a while, buyers say, well, hell, I'll do that. Yeah, okay, as soon as it closes.
Exactly.
Get out of my house. You ain't bringing that tool back in here. I don't know you from Adam's Off-Ox. Nobody can work on that house that's not bonded and licensed and all that stuff. Buyer can't work on it anyway. Unless the guy's a licensed contractor. And if they are, they'll understand bonded and licensed and insured and blah, blah, and all that stuff that's in the contract in paragraph 15, I think 15 or 16, coming right up. But the notice of non-responsibility says right on there, hey, if this guy, whatever he does, I, as the owner of this property, am not responsible. This guy falls off a ladder, that was his damn ladder. I gave him permission to access the property to do stuff, and I don't, whatever happens to them while they're there, I'm out. It's recorded and posted. And the recording date of the notice of non-responsibility is your protection from this day on. You're on your own, pal. Get that recorded before that knucklehead pulls up there with his truck and his drunk brother. Deal.
Like when the painter falls off the ladder?
Well, that was he working for the buyer?
He's
Working for the seller. Seller hired the guy, right? Kinda, pretty much, as I recall. Yeah, so that's kind of different, right? That's, you hire a guy to come in your house. Well, they're bonded, licensed, and insured, we hope, so maybe they got coverage for that. I don't even know how that works. Why did it work?
He was licensed, bonded, and insured.
So he just took care of himself with his own insurance or something? You guys, seller didn't get stuck for a guy falling off a ladder? Because what are you gonna do, teach the guy to climb a ladder? Hang on, show me how to climb a ladder. Okay, all right, here's a bucket with all your stuff, don't climb down, you ain't done.
Just a side note, if you hire somebody to do your place, get their license number, just go online. If they're not licensed, or if they're not insured, then they're not gonna be on there. And they'll have a real nasty note from the board underneath it.
Grr. Right, and that's, and it's in the contract, no one knows that. No one knows. Every once in a while, you'll bump into a listing agent that knows that. Wait, who's going in there? Don't you know they gotta be bonded, licensed, and insured, and blah, 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 and all that stuff. So yeah, not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can go in there. And speaking of home inspections, yeah, it's kind of a commercial for home inspectors, whether they're any good or not. It's kind of a risk shifting thing. Counsel the kids a lot before they send their dad in there to do the home inspection, because he used to build houses in Bakersfield 25 years ago. That's it. Have your dad go in there. That's fine. You guys, you're buyers. You can go look. Get a home inspector. Why don't you? Okay, so this form has the same stuff about contingency removals in it. So the seller's responding, the buyer makes a request, the seller's going to respond. The seller can attach a contingency removal. The seller's contingency removal might say, oh, you know what? I'm going to do everything, and I'm going to give you $5,000 because this is your lucky day. But I had to use this form to change some stuff. So I'm also attaching in paragraph 2B a CR form, a contingency removal form. And it says remove all your contingencies. Hey, buyer, how do you feel? How do you like me now? Read the form. Right? So they changed the form. They made a really good change on it because, like Elizabeth was saying, how come there's so many versions of this thing? So you make a request, you make a response, and the buyer just wants to change one thing. Like, I really want you to fix that sink or something, right? So on right down here, buyer can accept the seller's response and make a change that'll like fit right there. Is a good way to like tell your buyer, like, if I have to attach a sheet, maybe we ought to do another request because you have so much stuff you're mad at. But the buyer might say, well, the seller might say, I'm going to do everything except 3 things. The buyer might say, okay, that's great, but I want another $2,000. So you can make minor changes to the pirate form without going back and restarting the whole process. And the seller can make minor changes on the RR the same way. They help these forms out quite a bit. When they let you, it's like, if it wasn't for that one thing, we'd have a deal. Well, there's a place to put the one thing. And if the seller has, and this is why we have to have 10,000 forms. So if the seller is like, we're just not getting there, then 1C, buyer withdraws request for repair number 1, makes a new request and attached request for repairs number 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. All good?
Good.
Seller signs this one twice, kind of like a multiple counter offer. Seller says, here's my response. Buyer says, here's my change. And down here, seller can say, okay, your change is good. Let's do it. Or the seller can say, no, take it or leave it. Got to start over. That's the thing I don't like about this form, but I don't know how to fix it. Better get rid of it. We're almost there. Contingency removal form, and there's a bunch of these in there too, right? So contingency removal number 1, you're probably not removing all your contingencies if you've got a loan and a whole bunch of stuff. So there's a little list down the side here. This is that CR form we've been talking about. Buyer removes those contingencies specified below. Only the following individually checked buyer contingencies are removed, and you can check some stuff on there. A very common place to find yourself in 3 weeks through an escrow is in B. All buyer contingencies are removed except loan and appraisal. That's pretty common. That's after your request for repairs and all that stuff gets negotiated out. That's kind of how you want that to go. We're happy with the prelim. We saw the pest control. We got our request for repairs all done. So we can do this part of the contingency removal form and kind of keep the ball in the air, keep the deal moving along, keep the wheels greased, and keep those guys happy on the other side. We can keep our loan and appraisal contingency and then waive the other ones if we've still got some life left in the loan and appraisal contingency. This one at the bottom that you'll see a lot of seller signatures on only needs to be signed by the seller. See where the buyer signs there, Bob and Betty say, we're waiving these contingencies. The seller never signs this form. If the seller's got contingencies to remove, like the seller contingency for finding a replacement property to move to or something, that's the only time they ever sign this form. The seller never signs this form. The problem with this form is you sign it as a listing agent on their behalf. Let's make sure we talk to them about it before we just drop a set of initials in there and send it back. Make sense?
You always have that confirmation of receipt done?
That's the only evidence that it ever went anywhere. So on the contingency removal, right now, I mean, you know, I tell the seller what's going on, but I'll turn that thing around because as soon as they get it back, now that contingency's out. It's arguable that it's not until I send it back, because this thing doesn't say not necessary to create a binding agreement or any of that stuff.
Right.
This is the only evidence that it even got delivered. So once it's been delivered, the contingencies are waived. So I'll turn that around as fast as I can, of course, after a chat with the seller. Because maybe we don't like it. Maybe we want them to waive some more contingencies. So at that point, just a few more minutes. This is a notice to perform that we were talking about a little while ago. Notice to buyer to perform. There's also a notice to seller to perform. You're probably not going to use that one very often, because the seller doesn't have a lot of contingencies. They have some obligations they got to get done, and you kind of want to make sure they're on top of that. But you just sort of help them along, I think, is a way to do that. Make sure you're approving and that kind of stuff. Notice to buyer to perform is actually treated in the contract in paragraph 14B. Talks about notice to perform. And the default in there is you can give a notice to perform anytime from 2 days before the actual drop dead date, so to speak, of the contingency, and ad infinitum after that. So if you have a 17-day contingency period, the buyer has a 17-day contingency period, you can't notice them for that until 15 days in. You can't notice them early. You can't say, you know what, I've changed my mind. I want you to get out of here. But you can't force my hand. You can only make me do what I said I was going to do. Does that make sense? So you'll see here in this form, seller gives buyer notice to remove the following contingencies or take the specified contractual action. So you got contingencies on one side, contractual action on the other side. And this is where I've talked about every time we do the RPA, I talk about the initial deposit. If your seller's got like 3 offers in a row, the seller's first chance to get out of this deal is with the initial deposit. Buyer has 3 days to get that deposit in. If it doesn't show up, then you notice them. And if it doesn't show up within 2 days after the notice, you can cancel the escrow and move on to your next buyer. So the seller doesn't have a whole lot of opportunities to get rid of a buyer. Number one is initial deposit. Hopefully you'll remember that. So contractual action is the buyer promised they would do something, take an action, and they're late, or the loan or some of the other contingencies are coming up, and we don't want them to run late, so we're going to notice. And this form works like the request for repairs and response due, where there's basically the seller signs it and notices the buyer, and then the buyer's agent is the one who's, I mean, you can have the buyer initial this. It says received by buyer or authorized agent on, and a set of initials go there, and then you say, yep, I got it. I got your notice. Now, you can't hold it up just by being slow on the confirmation. That's not going to fly. I can't imagine a court in the land having hold it. Questions on the notice?
Yeah, what happens when somebody gives you a notice to perform at the end of your contingency period instead of 2 days before?
Well, you can give it any time, right? Any time from 2 days before till like 2 weeks
Right,
after.
you haven't waived your contingency, so what happens, right? Day 17, they send you a notice to perform. They just gave you 2 more days.
Right, yep. Yeah, so if you're running late on your notices, it's like, make sure you're talking to the seller all the time, right? That's exactly right. The contingencies run on forever until somebody puts in a notice to perform, and then that gives them 2 more days if you're late. So on day 19, we just gave him 21. Day 22, we just gave him 24. It's excellent. Same as being late on the listing agent's Avid. You just extended the review time for the transfer disclosure statement because the transfer disclosure statement is deemed not to have been delivered. The seller did not live up to their disclosure obligation until the listing agent is done with his Avid and sends it in.
Is the seller, I'm sorry, is the seller's agent required to do an Avid?
They're required to do a, now that's probably, I mean, the short answer is no. It depends where you work, like probably. But you have to perform your obligation on the transfer disclosure statement. So you either have to do an Avid or you have to put something in paragraph, I forgot what, like 7A or some junk like that, kind of close to the top of page 3. There's a place for the listing agent to write, listing agent notes no items for disclosure, listing agent notes the following items for disclosure, or listing or see attached to Avid. They have to check one of those boxes and do something.
That's your call, but you want us to do Avids, right?
Yeah, so the way the form is and the way the law is, the listing agent has to do something, but I love that Avid. I mean, you really gotta be asleep at the switch to blow your responsibility when you're carrying directions to the property. So everybody's doing Avid. You're not sure?
The reason I asked.
I'm not getting a nut out of Bob.
The one I just closed escrow on, and he sent a note that seller's agent will not do an Avid.
Yeah, I've seen him do that. I see it more in Santa Maria than anywhere else. Why, Santa Maria? Why? It's not up to you to, but they have to do something. They got to do something. I mean, they can send all the notes they want, but they better have filled in their part of the TDS. Now they have got to started sending that note because the transaction coordinators are like, "Hey, where's your Avid, dork?" And they're like, "We don't do Avids down here. We're too smart for the Avid." But they do have to do something with that paragraph on the listing agent's paragraph on page 3. And the buyer's agent is legally required by the state of California to do the same thing. It just doesn't have to be, it doesn't affect the seller's delivery of the TDS. That all just makes sense. Maybe? Got a question? Ad full of answers. What time is it? Dude, you're over. I'm over, but I'm not finished. So, all right, so we give them, so why do some people hate the notice to perform? Why? It's the rudest form in real estate, they say. But what happens is, so the seller says, you know what, Mr. Buyer, I'm getting tired of your guff. You either heave to, or I'm canceling this escrow. So what is your lever? What is the threat you're gonna make to the buyer? Cancel the escrow. You do what I told you, or by God, I'm going to cancel. Cancel your socks off. I don't care. I don't like it anymore anyway. So you're not really helping the seller hold the deal together.
No, you're not. No.
So they got to know. It's like, you know, what are we going to do about that? Okay, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, we can notice them. We can put them on notice. We can give them 2 days to perform this contingency. And if we're trying to get rid of them, we want to notice. We really want to notice. We're going to give them 2 days to do this thing they haven't done. And right after that 2 days, the next form that's coming, what a segue, is cancellation. Because the only other thing you have to do is live with it. If the buyer goes, I'm not doing it, no, I'm not canceling. So you ask the seller, do you want to cancel? I really don't want to cancel. I just wanted them to finish. Well, they don't want to finish and they don't want to cancel. So what are you going to do? Well, I guess we're going to sit around and wait. I guess we are. We'll notice them again in a week or so. You feel maybe they're better. And that's all from communicating. It's like, why aren't they doing that thing they said they were going to do? Find out. Go, what is wrong with your loan? Let me talk to your lender. What is happening here? Well, actually, the buyers lied on the app and they got foreclosed on 3 years ago, and the lender just picked it up right at the end. Yes, it happened. It was my escrow. These things happen. So you got to be communicating. You might go another 3 weeks close. You know, I was raised in the slow market, so I know how to hold the deal together, and I will suffer through it. This hot market, you don't necessarily have to do it. It's like, hey, buyer, guess what? Get out. I don't care about your stupid loan and your buyer lying on the app. This house got shown every day this week. Get out of my deal. And the way to get them out is you cancel the contract. We probably talked about this already.
I had one last month, Gary, real quick. Had one last month. Cash deal, 3 days before we're supposed to close, I found out that they were getting along. Quick,
How'd you do that? There's some mechanics involved in that. That's an excellent point.
I sent a notice to farm, I demand to close.
Oh, they were all the way at the end?
Oh, we're 3 days.
Within 3 days of the close date? Oh, okay.
I think it was a demand to close.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, we're gonna look at that form in a minute. Yeah, that's a great form.
And then the cancellation came next.
Yeah, you're right, Bob. Sorry. Yeah, we meant well. Like, sure you did. You lied anyway. Why do they lie? Why do the wicked prosper? So to cancel the contract, you gotta have a reason to cancel the contract. And it used to be that everybody had to sign it. Now, usually the buyer will sign it to get their deposit back. So going all the way back to the initial deposit paragraph, get that deposit in escrow. Make sure that deposit shows up. You got nothing else to hang your hat on. Crank that deposit a little bit and get it in there. We always used to use, and still do, 2% of the purchase price. 1% is not enough. 3% is the legal limit. If you do like a coin toss on everything like I do, 2% works. So a $500,000 deal, make sure they got 10 grand in there or more. Anything over 3%, you can't have it anyway. So these guys with $50,000 deposits, like, I'm only entitled to 15, so thanks, but whatever. I know you're going to take 35 and leave even if you welch. But you got to have a reason. So there's a bunch of check boxes in your cancellation of contract. And it's a little bit of a confusing form. I wish it was better. So you got to pick who's canceling. Like the seller noticed them, and now they want them out. Sellers cancel, right? Sellers cancel. Now you're communicating all the time. So if the seller needs to push the issue, then the seller's canceling. We're going to use one of these little reasons down here. Failed to take an applicable contractual action or waive a contingency or whatever. And you have to have noticed them first. I noticed them like I was supposed to. They didn't waive. We're now going to exercise our cancellation rights. Seller has some cancellation rights. It could be because you've been doing all this talking, like maybe in Bob's deal, you could have said, hey, so those guys are getting along. We don't want to do that. Well, what do you want to do about that, Bob? We really want to cancel, so I'm going to send you a demand to close and all that stuff, or you can just cancel it. Then you can just, if you want to, you can check that box, both buyer and seller cancel the agreement, and check that little box on there, F, per mutual agreement. It's like, nobody really has to know what happened. We're both signing, we're out. So there's a reason you're going to push the issue, or you're talking and they go, you know what, this thing's not going anywhere. We're all agreed. We're out. Mutual agreement works just fine.
Excuse me, Gary, so in that situation, in the contract, he was going for, it stated cash. So in essence, he was in breach of contract?
Not breach, but
No?
well, he failed.
He failed
to perform what the contract said. The
So
contract
he's
said
entitled to
cash
his.
deal, and then we had backup offers.
But what if
Yes.
he didn't, and that was held off the market? And because he said he was going to do it cash, and now he's going for a loan. The seller had that off the market,
Specific
so there
performance.
was money there going to the
Didn't
seller.
perform
Kind of.
specific to the contract.
That's
So
why
are
I
they
do that.
entitled to
Well,
the
$92,000.
Yeah, the financing paragraph kind of talks about that,
So
but
that's a choice, that is a risk.
We decide you can keep your deposit as long as you sign the cancellation, so we can move on. to the next
yeah, a
one.
lot of times like if you're deposit, beat it, because I don't want to be stuck fighting with Fidelity for 2 months while you're
Fought
fighting.
for it.
So, did you have so one of the first chances for the seller to get out of that deal was verification of funds. So did you get a verification of cash right up front?
You know, we did it right up front. It was
So they had it, they just changed their
$10
mind.
million line of credit. And then they wait 3 days before to get a loan. And this house was such a mess, there's no way that a loan would even process from the fund.
That's the one you had.
So the line of credit would have worked, yeah. Yeah, okay, all right. Yep. So they did what they said, basically what they said they were going to do. Now in the financing paragraph, 3 something IJLZ, I don't know what it is, but it says in there that if the buyer says they're going to do one kind of financing and then they change their mind, they just lost their financing contingency. That's pretty much all that happened. It's not necessarily a breach or specific performance case. That's why I asked you, how did you do that? The demand to close was a really good way to do that, because as soon as they get to within 3 days of going to close escrow, thank you for looking for that, You can demand they close. No notice, no nothing. Hey, Friday's coming up, close it or get out. Now they're going to keep their deposit, probably, depending on kind of what's going on, because they lost their financing contingency, but all the other contingencies waived and stuff by then?
Yes.
Yeah, so they were trying to they said, here, this is wool, give me your eye. You're right. Yeah, I'm just going to fool you for a minute. I'm going to bend the spoon with my mind, you got to look away. Right? Interesting. So the release of deposit and cancellation fees are on that. They want to see, escrow wants to see everybody signed up on this form before they release that deposit. Escrow really hates to hang on to a deposit. They don't want deals like hanging around over here, man. They sure as heck don't want to be your bank. So everybody signs here, escrow's happy. They changed the contract now with escrow's help back in 2014 to say that if you guys can't get it together, and I've got signed cancellation from one party, I'm giving them that deposit back and we're out of here and forget about you. So watch out for that. If there's a beef, you have to let escrow know, do not do that, we have a beef. Fidelity did that too, but when that beef went on, was an REO and an attorney, or the doctor with the attorney daughter was buying it, and they welched, and the REO outfit asset manager, whoever it was, the seller was entitled to their deposit. And so the guy saddled up and wanted to fight. And Fidelity called me one day to say they were sending it back. I got the phone call in the middle of the mesa somewhere, I couldn't call them back. So we went back to town pretty fast and said, no. Oh, no. They're about to go to court over that. So escrow has another option they can do called action and interpleader, where they say, we're out of this. You guys do whatever you want. You have a contract. We're not part of it. We're putting this money somewhere else. And it'll be there when you guys are done fighting, and we're out. Don't even ask me. Just, I've got my legal department is now in charge of your deposit. So escrow can get out of it. But they will try to get out of it right quick. I think I can't remember what paragraph it's even in, but they got, I think, probably 13. I think if they're not happy with what you're telling them in 10 days, they're just going to release deposit, cancel the escrow, and go on their merry way. Good to know, right? There is a phrase in here where it says, seller authorizes release of buyer's deposit, less buyer's fees and costs to buyer. Very seldom is buyer ever going to have fees and costs and stuff like that. But I was in a deal one time where a buyer went and got an attorney and all kinds of stuff to protect the deposit. But the buyer had requested the seller, during the deal, we'd said, hey, we're going to pump that septic for you, or pump them both, I think it was why we wound up negotiating. And if this deal fails, you pay for it. And they said, okay. So it took a little while, and it beat the attorney on the side of the head a little bit, but they had to leave $5,000 there for, they took the rest of their deposit and left, but they had to go pay that bill. So there could be a buyer fee. So like being on top of your contract, know what's happening. It's unusual because usually escrow and everybody's going to go, whatever, we want the next deal anyway. So take your deposit, get out of here. We hope that everybody feels like we were fair and we didn't charge like an escrow fee or a management fee or something, and beat it. So it'll be unusual to see a, I put that in there, it is, and there's Bob's form. The key to the demand to close escrow form is, and ask CR where the 3 days come from. They go 3 days is assumed and considered reasonable in the courts. If you give somebody a 3-day notice to do something, we've been doing 3 days for everything. 3-day notice to pay or quit. 3-day notice for that, 3-day notice for that, 3-day right of rescission. 3 is like, 2's not enough, 5's too many, 3's good, kind of. So seller demands the buyer close escrow on the property. Now the bottom of this form is the reverse. Buyer demands that seller close. Hey seller, get your crap done, sign your deed and close my escrow. My money's sitting there. What are you doing? Right? Seller, but in this case, seller hereby demands the buyer close escrow on the property within 3 or blank days after receipt of this demand to close, but no earlier than the agreed upon close date. You can't notice them like a week early. That's why I asked Bob, were you late? Yeah, they were, what'd you tell me, 3 weeks late. So anytime after 3 days before the close, you can tell them, notwithstanding contingencies or whatever, it's about time you either close this escrow or got out. So you can demand to close, no notice to perform is necessary before this. You can just, within 3 days of the close date or any time after, just demand that they close. And I guess the trouble is, with a demand to close, if they don't close and cancel, they're probably keeping their deposit. But it all depends where you're at in the deal, what's happened with all your notices. And like if they waived all their contingencies and all that stuff, and they're not closing, it says, note to buyer, if you do not close by the end of the time period and seller has fully performed, seller may cancel the agreement, bring legal action against you for damages, including but not limited to the deposit, or bring legal action against you to force you to buy the property, which is that Dave was talking about specific performance. There's a popular suit called specific performance. It says, you know what, everybody did everything, freaking buy it. We're going to force you to fund this escrow, close this escrow, and own this house. Dang it. Never been in one of those.
No fun.
No fun, I'll bet. Yeah. All right. Any questions on any of that stuff? I think that's all I had on that list of junk I was doing today. And we went over the withdrawal of offers long ago, and it got too far away. Questions? Good stories about escrows? Hungry?
Good information.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to blame it on David that I went over, even though he probably only took like 2 minutes.
Now, these are 1 hour chairs.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I can tell. I see that chair working. Come on, buddy. No idea what happened to Trina. You might still be there.
Gary,
Thanks,
I'm
everybody.
still here.
Gary?
See you in a week. Will I? Yes. What am I
Drill in
doing?
1, but not 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think it's a week. Oh, flowers.
Go to Nova Scotia.
Oh, everybody's going. He's going to Nova Scotia. Wait, I can't decide. No, that's easy. Hawaii. Nova Scotia. Won't that be cold?
14 years.
Oh, really? Pretty much done with it. Yeah. Going to what is Nova Scotia? Isn't that about the farthest northeast you can get, or something like that?
You go
Like
farther north,
Greenland?
it's far enough. It's supposed to be 60% chance of rain, high around 60, lows around 51.
Oh,
That's
really?
not too bad.
Grover
It's a big
Beach weather, man.
It's a big fall thing. My wife's stressing over Maria. She ain't even hit Florida yet.
Oh,
So she's gonna get up there before us. Hopefully she does.
So that's out by Maine, is it?
It's up north
Yeah.
of Maine.
yeah, northeast of Maine.
Well,
Right?
we'll leave-
There's
we'll leave
Maine
New
and
York.
Nova Scotia's out there.
We'll leave New York, go out to Nova Scotia, then come across into Brunswick, and come back down the coastline. Portland, Maine, I think we stop at
What
one
are y'all
time.
gonna do up there?
It's cool.
Look at the colors.
Yeah, autumn's changing all the color, yeah.
I said, I can get you a box of Crayolas, it'll do the same thing, a lot less money.
We can
No.
plant a liquid amber.
Yeah.
They change.
Yeah, my wife's going back east in a couple of weeks on a vacation, again, without me this time. But, she's going to Boston.
Instructions on how we get around.
In a couple, yeah, it'll be all. Yep.
My wife's got a lot of relatives in New York, upstate New York. So we're gonna go there. We're gonna come back and go to Niagara Falls. And my daughter lives in Columbus. She's married to the military. So they're gonna fly over and meet us and go with us. Of course, we paid for it all, but we got lots of money.
Right, yeah, I know, right? Real estate agent, man. Rolling it. We're lucky it's not just falling out of your pockets while you walk away.
Actually, told me we paid for all 6 of them. What is
Paid for all 6 of them.
Yeah, well, my daughter, I don't have no issue with my in-laws, I do.
Yeah, right. It's like everybody over 40 pay your own way.
I'm kidding.
God, it's nice that you're able to do that.
I got a question for you, real simple question.
I'll make up an answer. Tell you what,
When you're in the new portion of car, you bring up your transactions. The only way I've been doing it, because I can't figure out how to do it, and you open up, let me just pop, you got yours open?
I did.
Pretty easy.
I was kind of hoping it was going to be there. Oh, there you go.
There's a new section, the new side. I'm trying to stay on that and figure out anything. I'm doing better on it.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I pop back over for something. Every once in a while that, typical, the new thing, it's like, doesn't work. It's like, okay, what happened there? Where'd that
Right.
form go? Like, it's a marathon.
You open this up here. Okay, you see what I'm saying?
But it's probably gonna open in the old one.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
see.
Well, jump over to the, try to do plus, yeah.
Can't tell how many times I've read that.
I know they keep putting them up there.
Oh, I'll be darned.
They're gonna save all this for you, do this for you.
Like that. There we go.
Okay, and once this opens up, before you click on anything, once this opens up right here, you've got your transactions.
Get rid of that. Click on that. I promise I'll read it.
Okay, you've got your transactions, so get your transactions if you would. I don't want to read that dashboard either. Okay, now, I don't care, just pick one, just open one, and I'll show you what I'm trying to do here. Problem on that. Okay, now when you're right here, before you go anywhere else, how do you open this up to look at it? What I've been doing is just hitting add document, and it erases a little window.
Should be right there.
Where? I'm looking. Oh, right there, okay. Okay, thank you.
Better? Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, there's no help.
Find
It's
that
like,
thing, and I
okay,
look.
guess.
So I hit the documents, I hit the add documents, it opens up the window, and I shut the window. That's all I have to do is get in there.
Well, you just did it now.
Yeah.
I'm using
I just
14.
couldn't figure out how to do it. I got no problem pressing on stuff.
So what I want to do is, while I'm at it, oh shit, sorry, I don't want to close the transaction.
Right.
I just
go to transaction, get that in.
I remember where that said you can tell it. Oh, it's probably settings. You can tell it, and I never did. When I saw that, I thought, man, I got to check that box. Somewhere in there was tell it to
Open without having
open
that.
the freaking transactions instead of the dashboard. I mean, somewhere in here. I don't know.
Cause I went to the Adrian or helps you. Shit, they put so many, shit, they had like 34 forms up for one thing.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, people say, well, look at Forms Advisor. I'm like, hey, you know what? Don't go nuts. I'm going to have to find that. I
So it'll
saw
open it up when you go to the transactions. I can care less about the dashboard. Because we use Dyslope. So it doesn't really.
Yeah, I'm even using a Recio transaction management platform, so I got no use for it. And then I don't change all my stuff. I don't make them pending in zip forms. I don't make.
I don't either. I don't either. Yeah, none of
My
that.
dashboard always looks the same.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, specific performance sucked. Well, I started to sue the attorney because the first attorney says, well, you're looking at $9,000 to get through this. At $8,000 bill. Turn this over to the other one. When I finally got one out of Paso Robles, she owns the Mill and Ranch, her family.
Oh, yeah.
She showed, we couldn't spray dress the tiger on her. She just so stuck out there, she strut. I said, you're just like a little rooster. She was like, strut. I said, yeah. She was, yeah. Judge is looking at me. He's not listening to what's being said. He'll find it my favorite.
Go to your strengths.
Yeah, that's what she did too. But she's sharp. I mean, her grandpa was a federal attorney, and she used to work for him in his office. So she learned a lot of crap.
Big gun down hanging around here.
So that's how you do that. Hit that little thing. Okay, yeah, because I hit transactions, but then I couldn't figure out how to get back into it without hitting that other window. So
yeah, I'll find that thing somewhere. So I saw it one day and I never saw it again. So
yeah, that happened to me a lot.
Email Fatima and go, hey, I want my forms to show up. Not that I'm just see what I feel.
Here, see you later. See you
All right.
probably next week.
Enjoy Nova Scotia.
Well, I got drink tickets paid for, so everything I drink's free. Already paid for it.
Drink tickets, then.
You ever turn the camera off?
I don't know how. Probably not. Are we still on?
So you wouldn't want it. No, I don't know. Hey, David.
Yeah.
How do you turn the camera off?
Do you care? little afterglow.
Press and you'll hit it. So yeah, she went in and got that already paid for, and all the steakhouse